In the spring of 2007, Annick Van Uytel was living a quiet, predictable life. She was 18 years old, lived with her parents and brother in the small Belgian municipality of the East, and spent her free time with a local Catholic scouting group. On Friday, April 27th, she attended a youth party organized by her scout troop in the neighboring town of Chatham. At around 4 a.m., feeling unwell, she told her friends she was heading home. She got on her bicycle, rode out into the early morning darkness, and disappeared. 2.5 hours later, her parents realized she had not returned. At 6:30 a.m., her mother, Martine, picked up the phone and dialed Annick's mobile number. The call went unanswered, but the cellular network still processed the routing request. As this map of the region shows, when Martine dialed the number, Annick's phone registered a connection at a specific communications tower in Holland, a few miles south of the party. Because of that single phone call, investigators immediately had a strict geographic perimeter. A mother's intuition had inadvertently narrowed the search radius to a specific municipality on the very first morning. The Belgian authorities responded with massive force. 70 police officers mobilized, 200 civilian volunteers fanned out across the fields. The army stepped in to assist. Helicopters scoured the tree lines, and investigators methodically interviewed 4,000 men living within the search sector. For 6 days, they found nothing. Then, a group of hikers walking along the banks of the Albert Canal spotted something floating in the water. It was a heavy-duty gray industrial waste bag, deliberately weighed down with 14.5 kilos of stones. When police retrieved it, the body inside was confirmed to be Annick. She had been held captive, subjected to severe physical trauma, and ultimately murdered. While her parents had been waiting by the phone, and while an army of searchers had combed the surrounding countryside, the man who killed her had simply returned to his daily routine, living quietly a few miles away. This produced a glaring contradiction. Law enforcement had deployed thousands of people and interviewed practically every adult male in the area, yet the killer had remained entirely invisible within the exact borders of their search grid. The initial investigation struggled to find a starting point. The bag used to hide the body was a commercial model designed for heavy waste, but it lacked any identifying markers. Investigators checked local suppliers and international manufacturers, but the trail went cold. Then months later, Annick's bicycle was discovered abandoned in Leuven. The perpetrator had been meticulous. The frame had been partially repainted ivory, and the serial number beneath the seat had been carefully filed off to prevent identification. However, looking closely at the schematic of the recovered bike, investigators isolated a critical microscopic trace. The frame was coated in a highly specific strain of pond algae. Lab analysis confirmed these organisms did not originate from the Albert Canal, where the body was found. The police now had the biological signature of the perpetrator's property. They had specific forensic data, but without a centralized DNA database hit or a specific address to test the water against, this material sat dormant in an evidence locker. 3 years later, the Belgian government's internal oversight body, Committee P, reviewed the investigation. They discovered that the perpetrator was never a ghost. His name was already in the files. This timeline tracks the procedural errors that derailed the case. On May 3, 2007, an investigator was scheduled to interrogate a local man named Ronald Janssen, whose name had surfaced in witness interviews. But when news broke that Annick's body had been pulled from the canal that same afternoon, the investigator abandoned the plan. Janssen was never questioned. Later that year, task force members compiled a short list of 31 high-priority targets who needed thorough vetting. Ronald Janssen was on that list. He was never brought in. Then, in 2008, a police officer from a nearby municipality forwarded a formal report to the detectives leading the Van Uytel case. Report noted that a man had been the subject of a rape complaint in 2005 and had recently been observed harassing young women at parties in Diest, Annick's hometown. The subject of that report was Ronald Janssen. Furthermore, the officer explicitly noted that Johnson's residence sat squarely in Hallen, a short walk from the exact communications tower that had pinged Annick's phone. This document reached the lead investigators and was filed away without action. Johnson remained free due to a fragmented communication system and administrative dismissals that allowed an active creditor to slip through the cracks of a massive dragnet. That bureaucratic failure carried a terrible cost. But on January 1st, 2010, 18-year-old Shauna Appeltans and her 22-year-old boyfriend Kevin Paulus drove back to their neighborhood in Holland after a New Year's party. When they pulled up, their neighbor was waiting for them. Armed with a gun and a container of flammable liquid, Ronald Janssen forced the young couple back into their own car and ordered Kevin to drive to an isolated dirt road. Janssen harbored a petty grievance over a neighborhood dispute. He shot them both, burned the vehicle to destroy evidence, and walked back to his house. This time, local detectives moved immediately. Recognizing the proximity and the prior disputes, investigators in Hasselt identified Janssen as their primary suspect and arrested him within 48 hours. During his interrogation, he casually confessed to the double murder. Kevin and Shauna's deaths were the direct outcome of the 2008 reports sitting unexamined in a file cabinet. Once Janssen was in custody, detectives reviewed his background and instantly flagged his connection to the dormant 2007 case. They contacted the regional authorities and reopened the Van Uytel files. Because Janssen had never been entered into the national database, the collected evidence had remained unmatched for 3 years. Now, with a fresh sample, the lab confirmed a definitive match between Janssen's DNA and a single hair found on Annick's body. Looking at the side-by-side data comparison, you can see how the investigation was finalized. While the DNA linked him directly to the victim, experts tested the water in Janssen's backyard and found a precise ecological match to the pond algae recovered from Annick's bicycle. Confronted with the science, Janssen confessed. The Belgian public was horrified to learn that this violent serial killer was a mild-mannered, sociable father of two who worked as a high school drawing teacher. He did not look like a monster. He leveraged his status as a respectable professional to deflect suspicion, manipulating the basic trust of his community to operate in plain sight. During the subsequent public inquiry, members of the Belgian parliament asked a question that still haunts the country's judicial system. If an investigator had simply knocked on Ronald Janssen's door in May of 2007, would Shauna and Kevin still be alive? The tragedy always traces back to that very first morning. Before the army was mobilized, before thousands of men were interrogated, a mother woke up and worried about her daughter. When Martine dialed the number at 6:30 a.m., she essentially provided the geographic signature of the perpetrator's home. That maternal instinct generated the digital data law enforcement needed. The evidence pointed toward a specific perimeter from day one, waiting to be acted upon. The enduring weight of the Ronald Janssen case lies in this reality. the system possessed the necessary data to connect the crimes 3 years earlier, yet failed to look at it. So that is the end of our video today. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care and see you next time.